She's much more experienced than I am. I don't think it was an easy win for her, so it's very...
She is the best tennis player and the best athlete that I have seen in the game of tennis.
On May 24th, 2026, Alex marks her 21st birthday in Paris, and less than 24 hours later, the gates of Roland Garros open for a moment that feels far bigger than a tournament appearance. This year, her name appears on the main draw with authority, not as a wildcard invitation and not as a qualifier fighting for a chance to stay alive, but as a top 40 player who secured her position through relentless dedication, signature victories, and months of sacrifice following the disappointment that defined her last visit to this stage. Praise surrounding her rise has only intensified, with legendary 7-time French Open champion Chris Evert delivering a statement that still resonates across tennis, that Alex is the finest tennis player and athlete she has seen competing today. Those words continue to fuel conversations throughout the sport as analysts search for ways to explain the transformation unfolding in front of them. It almost feels as though tennis itself has not fully prepared for what is coming. Yet the young talent from the Philippines arrives ready to meet the spotlight head-on. 1 year earlier, at the 2025 French Open, her debut campaign ended in frustration with a first-round loss to Emelina Arango only 2 days after turning 20, a difficult beginning that opened the door to criticism and doubt. But the atmosphere surrounding her return could not feel more different. She enters Paris carrying a live world ranking of number 38 after reaching a career-best number 29 just 2 months earlier in March, proving that the player stepping onto the clay in 2026 is no longer viewed as a promising outsider, but as someone capable of challenging the established order. Adding to the intrigue, Rafael Nadal, the undisputed king of clay and owner of a record 14 Roland Garros titles, has reportedly been offering Alex regular guidance through the Rafa Nadal Academy, a detail she personally confirmed during her Tennis Channel interview at the 2026 Rome tournament. Because of that, this comeback arc no longer feels like a storyline created by headlines. It feels like a clock ticking towards something bigger. Yet Roland Garros has never rewarded sentiment or emotion. It exposes uncertainty, magnifies flaws, and has humbled icons while dismantling the momentum of players far more experienced than a 21-year-old from Manila. And as Alex returns to Paris, the critics have not forgotten the uneven moments of her clay campaign, including an early departure at the WTA 125 event in Oeiras, carrying every result with them into what could become the defining chapter of her journey so far. Her clay season offered enough difficult moments to keep skepticism alive. A second-round exit in Madrid against Elise Mertens, followed by a third-round defeat in Rome at the hands of world number 2 Elena Rybakina, gave critics fresh material to question whether Alex truly possesses the consistency required to make a deep Grand Slam push on clay. The scrutiny only intensified when legendary coach Brad Gilbert, the same strategist widely credited with helping reshape Andre Agassi's career, reportedly commented after Alex's Miami Open round of 16 loss to Karolina Machova that significant improvements were still necessary if she wanted to establish herself among the sport's elite. And when someone with Gilbert's decades of experience speaks, the tennis world pays attention, because few understand better the difference between athletes who briefly touch greatness and those capable of remaining there. Yet the most difficult obstacle standing in Alex's path may not be the opponents waiting across the net, the pressure of expectations, or even the rankings themselves. It may be the memory she carried back to Paris. The image remains vivid. A 20-year-old celebrating her birthday in the same city before leaving Roland Garros with the disappointment of a painful first-round exit. The setting is unchanged, the timing feels almost identical, and the spotlight burns just as brightly. But the player returning now is not the same one. She arrives 1 year older, more experienced, more resilient, and carrying expectations that have evolved dramatically. The conversation has moved beyond whether she deserves to be here. Now the question is whether this birthday in Paris becomes the turning point that transforms an old disappointment into the opening chapter of something unforgettable. And perhaps the most fascinating part is that the strongest case in her favor may not come from destiny or emotion. It may come from timing itself, because occasionally the calendar begins telling the story before competition even starts. May 23rd, 2005 marks Alexandra Eala's official birth date, documented across major tennis records from the WTA to the ITF. May 24, 2026 marks the official opening of the Roland Garros main draw. Fewer than 18 hours stand between those moments. No schedule revision, no extra day of preparation, and no adjustment could change that alignment. The calendar placed Alex into one of the most emotionally significant moments of her young career, and this time she stepped toward it without hesitation. But ultimately, the heart of this story is not about dates or symbolism. It is about everything she had to become just to earn the right to stand at that line and begin again. 12 months earlier, Alex arrived at the 2025 French Open carrying a wildcard entry, a place granted on belief, promise, and the expectation of what she could become. In 2026, the story is entirely different. This time, she enters Roland Garros with no invitations attached and no favors involved, her position secured purely through ranking points earned across months of results. Reaching a career-high world ranking of number 29 in March guaranteed her place in the main draw through performance alone, eliminating any need for special access or external opportunity. Even with her ranking settling around number 42 and trending upward again toward a live position near number 38 following Rome, the numbers reflect something more important than placement. They reflect sustained progress from a player who has made the tennis world pay attention. Imagine reviewing the tournament entry list and seeing Alex Eala's name not because organizers extended an invitation, but because she played well enough to take the spot herself. That shift changes the entire conversation. Potential becomes proof. Promise becomes legitimacy. One of the strongest signs of that transformation appeared in Rome on May 11, 2026, when she faced world number 2 Elena Rybakina in the round of 32. Before the match, expectations leaned heavily toward a routine victory for an established Grand Slam champion against an emerging 21-year-old. But reports surrounding the contest suggested the experience was far less straightforward than expected, with Rybakina acknowledging afterward that Eala created more problems than anticipated. The final score, 6-4, 6-3 in Rybakina's favor, may look controlled at first glance, yet those who followed the match understood that the numbers did not fully capture the tension on court. Alex extended points, created uncomfortable exchanges, and displayed the bold, attacking style that has fueled her rapid rise through the rankings. And even in defeat, progress continued. Her live ranking moved upward. The match ended in a loss, but the broader trajectory remained positive. She gave up one result while quietly gaining momentum in the larger journey. Looking across her entire clay campaign, the emerging picture is not one of a player struggling to adjust to the surface. It is the picture of someone developing faster than expectations allowed. In Madrid, she opened with a convincing victory over Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova before eventually falling to Elise Mertens. In Rome, she produced one of her strongest stretches of the season, defeating Magdalena Frech 6-0, 3-6, 6-4, and then overcoming Olympic silver medalist Zheng Qinwen 6-4, 6-3 to earn her meeting with world number 2 Elena Rybakina. Over only a few weeks on clay, Alex collected valuable main draw wins against accomplished opponents and steadily forced observers to reconsider the ceiling of her game. With each tournament, the same realization became harder to ignore. This was no longer simply a promising young player gaining experience. It was a competitor actively becoming something bigger. On clay, the changes are becoming impossible to ignore. Her movement now appears instinctive. Her confidence feels earned rather than projected, and the calm that once seemed vulnerable under pressure no longer disappears in difficult moments. For those who followed Alex Eala long before the rankings and headlines accelerated, this evolution does not feel sudden at all. It feels overdue. The numbers are only beginning to reflect what loyal observers have recognized for years: the competitiveness in her game, the ease in her footwork, and the poise she brings onto tennis's biggest stages. Few opinions carry more authority in evaluating that transformation than Chris Evert. A 7-time Roland Garros champion, Evert did more than win on clay. She established one of the defining standards of excellence the surface has ever seen. After decades spent analyzing elite tennis as one of ESPN's most respected voices, she understands better than most how to distinguish excitement from something truly sustainable. That is why her reaction to Alex's breakthrough mattered so deeply. On March 27, 2025, after watching the young Filipina defeat 3 Grand Slam champions during an extraordinary WTA run, Evert shared her thoughts publicly, writing on X that it was incredible Alex still had anything left considering she had already beaten 3 major champions. The impact of that message extended far beyond encouragement. It did not read like polite recognition or routine praise. It sounded like genuine surprise from someone who has spent a lifetime around greatness. That response revealed a shift in perception. Alex was no longer being discussed merely as a gifted young prospect with future potential. She was beginning to look like a player who could influence where the sport itself was heading. Evert did not choose exaggerated language casually. She focused on endurance, resilience, and the ability to continue producing elite-level tennis after already accomplishing something remarkable. That context matters. One of the greatest clay court players in history publicly expressing amazement at a teenage athlete from the Philippines competing against some of the most accomplished names in tennis said more than rankings ever could. At that point, Alex was still outside the sport's highest tier, still trying to force her way into worldwide recognition. Today, the picture is entirely different. She is 21 years old, established inside the world's top 40. Learning within the environment of Rafael Nadal's academy under the influence of the 14-time Roland Garros champion himself, and preparing to compete in the same tournament that helped define both Nadal's dominance and Evert's legacy. Tennis is not running out of things to say about her. It is simply catching up to what some of its most respected voices already sensed long ago. And since then, the story has continued to grow. Roland Garros 2026 no longer feels like another stop on Eala's calendar. It feels like a crossroads, the kind of moment where momentum either becomes permanence or fades into history. Last season, seeing a Filipina stand in the French Open main draw felt historic. Now, the expectations surrounding her return suggest something even bigger may be unfolding. Last year, Eala's presence in Paris felt like a breakthrough moment. This year, her place at Roland Garros feels natural, expected, even, and that quiet change in perception may be the most meaningful step of her entire career. Headlines celebrate milestones because they happen once, but expectations are what build lasting legacies. That is why what unfolds in Paris now reaches far beyond a single tournament result. A strong Roland Garros campaign could create major movement in the rankings, with several analysts suggesting she has a realistic chance to close the gap on Emma Raducanu and potentially move ahead with the right run. The financial stakes are significant as well, with her career earnings already moving beyond the $500,000 range. Reaching the second week in Paris could accelerate her path toward the $1 million milestone much sooner than many predicted. Yet rankings and prize money only tell part of the story. In the background, a larger narrative is taking shape. With the 2026 Asian Games in Nagoya approaching, conversations across Asian tennis are increasingly centered on the possibility that a new leading figure for the continent is emerging in real time through this clay season. Match after match, result after result, Alex is evolving beyond representing only the Philippines. She is beginning to occupy a place at the forefront of the next generation of Asian tennis. At the same time, Roland Garros carries another kind of weight entirely: timing. Wimbledon begins less than 4 weeks after the final in Paris, meaning the next few weeks will not simply define her clay campaign, but will influence the confidence, momentum, and expectations she carries into grass season as well. This always felt like the year where her rise would either become undeniable or force the sport to reassess how quickly she could truly climb. And somehow, her birthday arrived directly inside that moment of evaluation. Madrid offered another revealing chapter in that evolution. After opening with a win over Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, she ran into Elise Mertens in the second round, and the match exposed something every rising player eventually faces: fatigue. The demands of clay and the intensity of the schedule appeared to push her toward physical limits she was still learning to manage. But the response mattered more than the loss. Rather than chasing form immediately, she stepped back, recovered, adjusted, and returned in Rome looking renewed. 10 days later, she produced one of her strongest performances of the season by defeating Olympic silver medalist and top 30 player Zheng Qinwen 6-4, 6-3. That reaction revealed something important about where her mentality has reached. Later, when speaking with Tennis Channel about Rome and the growing attention surrounding her progress, she did not focus on disappointment, offer excuses, or dwell emotionally on the loss to world number 2 Eala Rybakina. Instead, she spoke with composure about the level she was producing and openly identified the improvements still needed to consistently challenge the sport's elite. That perspective stands out at her age. Many young players become consumed by outcomes. Alex already sounds focused on process and growth. Even after competing in one of the biggest matches of her career, she spoke less like a breakthrough talent and more like someone already preparing for the next stage. That type of credibility cannot be manufactured through promotion or hype. It is earned through performances. The birthday in Paris, the direct main draw entry, the continued rise in rankings, and even the sense that Eala Rybakina walked away recognizing the match had demanded more than expected all point toward the same conclusion. The conversation around Eala is no longer about whether she belongs here. It is about what happens if this becomes the moment everything changes. Looking back now, the pieces no longer feel disconnected. More than a year ago, Chris Evert was already describing Eala in extraordinary terms, long before most of the clay court results existed to support the growing excitement. Then there is Rafael Nadal, the greatest Roland Garros champion in history, quietly becoming part of her development through the academy that bears his name and helping shape her understanding of the sport's most unforgiving surface. Add to that the sequence of events this season, a physically demanding setback in Madrid, followed not by frustration or panic but by reflection, adjustment, and a powerful response in Rome only 10 days later. Taken individually, each moment might seem small. Together, they begin to look like evidence of something larger. Alex is not arriving at Roland Garros 2026 carried by emotion, social media momentum, or the novelty of a rising name. She arrives with earned ranking points, verified results, increasing experience, and the visible respect of two of the most accomplished clay court figures the game has ever produced. One recognized something special in her before she had even entered the world's top 40. The other has spent years building the environment where she learned how to endure and compete on clay. And little by little, what longtime supporters believed before the wider tennis world caught on is becoming harder to dismiss. The rankings tell part of the story. The main draw confirms another part. The respect from legends adds a different kind of validation, which leaves only one question hanging over Paris now. Can Eala finally break through and win her opening match at Roland Garros 2026? Or will the unusual overlap of birthday memories and Grand Slam pressure create another difficult chapter? The draw could appear at any moment, and once it does, the conversation will change instantly. The first opponent, the matchup dynamics, the clay projections, and the possible route through Paris will suddenly become real. If you have followed this journey from the beginning, this is the moment where anticipation turns into answers, and the next chapter starts the second the bracket is revealed.